Hi and welcome back. Bill here, your host for Fables Adventures. Thanks for coming back. We're glad to have you back here to our daily podcast of audio stories. Today's story is called The Frequency of Lies. We are always happy to see you here, and we want you to know that we appreciate when you hit like or comment and let us know that you're enjoying being here with us at Fables Adventures. A word of warning about today's story. It contains mature themes including corporate corruption. It references murder, betrayal, and complex moral choices, and is recommended for listeners over the age of 16. Music producer Salem Oddsworth can't hear pitch but senses emotional frequencies, making them brilliant at healing through sound. While investigating corruption at Meridian Records, Salem discovers evidence of stolen music and possible murder, with help from their only friend, Morgan Chase. But when Salem downloads the final files, they encounter an older Morgan who reveals the truth. Morgan is Margaret Chase, hired to monitor Salem and protect the powerful families behind Meridian. Their entire friendship was surveillance. Now Salem must choose: expose the truth and die, or destroy the evidence and offer Morgan the choice to become real. Get ready for The Frequency of Lies.
The frequency of lies. The basement of the Meridian Records building smelled like rust and forgotten dreams. Salem Oddsworth stood in front of a wall of server towers, their fingers tracing the cool metal casings, while Morgan Chase paced nervously behind them, checking their phone every few seconds. "We shouldn't be here," Morgan whispered, though they both knew that whisper meant nothing in a building that never truly slept. Salem didn't respond. They couldn't hear the pitch of Morgan's anxiety, couldn't detect the frequency of fear in the other's voice, but they could feel it. The way the air seemed to vibrate differently when danger was close. It was the same sense that guided their production work, that supernatural ability to understand how sounds fit together, how they could mend something broken inside a person, even when Salem themselves heard the world as a kind of beautiful chaos. "Give me 5 more minutes," Salem said, sliding a drive into the tower's port. The files had started appearing 3 weeks ago in the strangest of places. A receipt tucked behind a golden record in the executive lounge. A contract fragment wedged in a filing cabinet in the bathroom. Salem's obsessive eye for overlooked details, the same eye that once spent 6 hours rearranging ambient synths by millimeters of temporal delay, had caught what everyone else missed. The record label wasn't just corrupt. It was built on a foundation of crimes so ancient that the current executives didn't even know they were standing on graves. Morgan grabbed Salem's shoulder. "Car in the parking garage. Lights just came on." Salem's stomach dropped. Not because they could interpret the meaning of Morgan's tone, but because they could feel the spike in vibration through the floor. The entire building's energy had shifted. It happened sometimes when Salem's work was near completion, that moment when the composition reached its crescendo and everything trembled in anticipation of resolution. The drive filled with documents. Salem watched the percentage climb. 75%. 80%. The elevator chimed 3 floors up. "Salem, I know. 85%. Salem's hands moved with the certainty of someone who had arranged thousands of sound layers, each one finding its perfect place. The files were devastating. Master recordings from 1987 showing how Meridian had acquired its first catalog. Not purchased, coerced. A young artist named Diane Voss, backed into a corner, her music stolen through legal language designed specifically to confuse. But there was more. Letters written in Diane's hand, a daughter born the year after, and a will, updated regularly, that mentioned both a child and a trust fund that never existed in any official record. 90%. The elevator reached their floor. The doors slid open with the whisper of hydraulics that sounded, to Salem's ears, like the beginning of a song they couldn't quite finish. 2 figures stepped out. Not security. Worse. James Whitmore, CEO of Meridian Records, his sharp suit catching the fluorescent light like a blade. And beside him, someone Salem's mind refused to process immediately. Someone who shouldn't be here, shouldn't be possible. Morgan. Except not. This Morgan was older, broader, with silver threading through dark hair. This Morgan wore a suit that cost more than Salem's apartment. This Morgan moved with the predatory grace of someone who had always been dangerous. Salem, the older Morgan said. And that voice, it was Morgan's voice, but deeper, with an accent that had been carefully erased from the younger version. You always were persistent. The drive hit 100%. Salem's fingers went numb. Morgan Chase, the real Morgan Chase, their sidekick and only friend in this entire beautiful, decaying city, wasn't who they claimed to be. I don't understand, Salem managed. James Whitmore smiled. Let me explain. Margaret Chase came to us 20 years ago, Diane Voss's daughter. She had questions about her mother, about the trust fund that supposedly belonged to her, but which her mother's handlers had kept hidden. We made her an offer. Help us stay ahead of anyone who came looking, and we'd make sure she never had to worry about money again. The older Margaret, because that's who this had to be, Salem understood now. The real name beneath Morgan's carefully constructed identity, stepped closer. I was good at my job. I became an expert at finding people like you before you became problems. And when you started asking questions, when your obsessive little mind began connecting dots. She gestured to the drive in Salem's hand. I made sure I was there. I watched you. I earned your trust. But you helped me, Salem whispered. You helped me find evidence that my mother was victimized, evidence that would destroy the company that made me wealthy, that would expose secrets that go deeper than you understand. Margaret shook her head. No, Salem. I helped you find a carefully curated version of the truth. A version that implicates the executives but protects the real architects of this company. The people who came before Whitmore. The people who still matter. Salem looked at Whitmore. Your board of directors. Among others, Margaret said softly. There are 12 families that built Meridian. Families that own half the city. Families that had my mother killed when she became inconvenient and her body hidden so thoroughly that her death was classified as a disappearance. If you expose what's on that drive, you'll be killed the way my mother was. But the people who matter will still be protected. Salem's heart was doing something strange. It was like listening to a discordant note that wouldn't resolve, that kept creating tension in the ear. For the first time in their life, Wished they could hear pitch, could understand the audio landscape the way normal people did. Maybe then they could make sense of this betrayal. So, what happens now? Salem asked. Now, Margaret said, reaching for the drive. You give me that, and you walk out of this building. You go back to your apartment. You stop asking questions. You make beautiful music that heals people, and you live your life knowing that some truths are too heavy to carry. Salem's fingers tightened on the drive. Or, Margaret continued, you try to be a hero. You try to expose everything. You'll die. And Morgan, the real Morgan, the identity I created specifically to watch you, dies with you. Because the people I work for don't leave loose ends. Morgan was never real, Salem breathed. Morgan was real enough, Margaret said. And there was something genuine in her voice then, something that vibrated with an emotion Salem could finally interpret. Regret. I became Morgan. Every conversation we had, every moment you thought you were making a friend, those were real. I didn't expect that. I didn't expect to care. Salem looked at the drive. Inside it was evidence of coercion, theft, possibly murder. It was the composition that could finally make sense of all the broken pieces. But it was also a sentence. For them. For the person they thought Morgan was. And suddenly, Salem understood something that their broken ears had been trying to teach them their entire life. That sometimes the most important truths aren't found in the details of contracts and communications. Sometimes they're found in the resonance between two people, in the frequencies that can't be recorded or exposed or verified. Salem smashed the drive against the concrete floor. The plastic shattered. The components scattered like the pieces of a broken song. What are you? Margaret started forward, but Salem raised a hand. I can't hear pitch, Salem said quietly. I've been deaf to one of the most fundamental aspects of how the world communicates. But I can feel frequency. I can sense when something's resonating at the same wavelength I am. And when we met, Morgan, you resonated with me in a way that told me we were made of similar sounds, broken frequencies trying to find harmony. Margaret's face was unreadable. So, I'm going to give you a choice, Salem continued. The one you never got. The one my mother never got. You can keep protecting them. Keep living the lie. Keep being the person they made you into. Or you can choose to be real. You can choose to be the Morgan I've been working with, the one who cared enough to risk everything. If I betray them, we disappear, Salem said. Both of us. I have resources, not wealth like yours, but networks, musicians, producers, people who understand how to hide in the margins of this city. We leave. We become ghosts. James Whitmore stepped forward. This is a mistake. Salem turned to him. You built an empire on a young woman's death, on coercion and theft and institutional cruelty. And you think I'm making a mistake? They'll find you, he said flatly. Maybe, Salem agreed. But not today. Margaret was still standing there, tears running down her face, and Salem realized this was the moment, the note that had been held too long, finally resolving. The dissonance becoming harmony. Come with me, Morgan, Salem said, extending their hand. Be real. Be the person I fell in love with. For a long moment, nothing moved. The basement hummed with the sound of the server towers, a frequency that only Salem could truly hear, the sound of secrets being deleted, of silence being chosen over truth. Margaret took Salem's hand. They ran, the city above them, gleaming and decaying, intoxicating and treacherous, would search for them. The 12 families would send hunters. But in the underground studio spaces, in the forgotten warehouse rooms where musicians made art in the shadows, Salem and Morgan would disappear into the frequency of their own choosing, and the most beautiful part of their story, the part that could only exist outside of recorded evidence and exposed documents, was that sometimes justice wasn't about truth. Sometimes it was about choosing love in the face of lies, about becoming real in a city that had taught you how to be false. As they emerged into the neon-soaked streets of the music district, Salem reached for Morgan's hand and squeezed once. In response, Morgan squeezed back twice. 3 beats, a heartbeat, a rhythm that needed no pitch to be heard. It was, Salem thought, the most perfect arrangement they'd ever heard.
Thanks for listening to our story today. We hope that you enjoyed it. Our story was created with the Fables Adventures app for iPhone and iPad. If you enjoyed listening and want to create your own stories, if you want to participate in the Fables Adventures community of creators, and if you want to get the opportunity to have one of your stories featured right here on our YouTube channel or Spotify podcast, download the app on the Apple App Store. The link is available in the description. Drop us a like, subscribe, and follow us for more from Fables Adventures. And thank you for joining us here.